on cassava disease detection. As you know, back of the continent, we use a lot of cassava, except for South Africans. They use meal. But back of the continent is cassava, a lot of it. But there's also cassava is prone to disease. So now can you use AI to help with disease detection before it happened? So that's one of the projects that we're working on. The other project we're working on is spatial planning, which is town planning. If you notice now in town planning, a lot of the shacks have no address. And now with Plus Code, we can give you an address. And now we need, in partnership with government, to give people an identity, because location and address is part of your identity. When you are invisible to society, you're also invisible to services. Nothing comes to you. Whereas if you have a proper address and a legal address, more things come to you, including electricity, water, things we take for granted. And that's how now with Plus Code, actually in partnership with the team in Ghana who came up with the solution. So I'm just trying to show you, like in health, there's a few platforms now we're working on. One of them is called Dem Assist, where actually now if you go on Google Lens and you use Google Lens, and if you have a skin issue and you zoom into that skin with your camera, it will be able to tell you with 90% accuracy of what this potential skin disease is, and that you really need to go see a doctor. So that's health in people's hands. Same, the other thing is now on TB. So Africa still has a lot of TB patients. And now imagine if we can be able to help with democratizing scanning of TB. Because some hospitals, I was once injured, coma, and I landed in a hospital. I woke up from coma after 7 days. No one knew what was wrong with me because the x-ray was not working. So the nurses said, as long as you're breathing, you are on the not priority list. Our priority list is anyone who looks like they are dying tomorrow or today. Now imagine if you can democratize scans, you can democratize x-rays, you can help hospitals. Instead of now needing more doctors, you use technology to multiply what we have shortage on. So the way we're looking at this is, can we find solutions at a profit? We're not an NGO, but solutions at a profit that benefit society at a scale. And my job really is to make sure that we take those solutions, we integrate them into YouTube, we integrate them into search. And now if you look on Google Lens, there's a lot of, if you do text to speech now, that's just AI. And the last thing is on education, my passion, jobs and education. How do we use the power, whether generative AI or any other form of AI, to reduce unemployment, to increase high quality education for everyone? Everyone deserves high quality education, whether in the rural area. I was in Holland and I was looking at kids attending school. Poor kids, rich school kids are going to the same quality school, and the cream rises to the top. That's what we want here as well, that the cream must rise, not because your parents can send you synthesion, but it must be because you're just smart and not anything else. And at the moment, we don't have that. Recently, last year, actually, or early this year, we launched Interview Warm-Up. And Interview Warm-Up, really, all it does is help you improve your job interview skills. And it's got a voice assistant, it's got a text-to-speech and speech-to-text embedded in it, and it helps you actually. And it even tells you, oh, your answer sucks. Okay, it's nicer than me. It tells you your answer is bad. Perhaps if it were you, I would answer this way. And then it asks you to repeat, and it teaches you how to do interview better. And these are solutions that currently exist now that Google is developing, trying to make sure that we meet the mission of democratizing knowledge, organizing the world's information, make it universally accessible for everyone. And the last two things is useful and helpful. And then I add the word at a profit. So that's just And this is kind of what I see as great capitalism, when I will consider it Ubuntu capitalism, where you are able to make money, but you're also able to help someone. And that person can also value the help. And then it's a win-win. And I'm looking for that. I want capitalism to become more Ubuntu plus capitalism. And if I could do both, then I would sleep well at night. So I don't want capitalism that's just capitalism for the sake of maximizing shareholder value only. So I'm really glad you're here, because without you, it's impossible, because we need the stacks and we need the substacks, we need APIs, you are the people that will build the solution. Lastly, from me, please do remember, no one buys a code. No one buys AI. Everyone buys a solution. My job as a marketer is to sell and market solutions. I don't need clever code. Society doesn't need clever code. What society needs is a solution powered, multiplied by amazing code, amazing generative AI. If you can do that, please let me know. I even help you make sure that everyone knows about it. And you get to make the profit and society gets to benefit as well. I'm really glad you're all here. And I'm really glad that we're starting to have these discussions around AI, the pros and cons, and we must not only shy away also on the things that are not great about AI. My mom said generative AI is mostly like a man. So I said, what do you mean? That's not nice. And she says, but it hallucinates. And then I said, oh, you know that it hallucinates. And he says, yeah, like most men, overconfident and wrong. I was like, what? So that's what she said. Then I said to her, so does it scare you? She says, no, that's promising, because at least this one, I know it's going to be right at some point. I'm not sure about you as a man, but I know this one is going to be confident and right. You, I'm not sure. So that gave me hope. Even my own mother understands that generative AI is still work in progress. It's still in development. We still have a lot of work to do. But the most important thing is, let's make sure we make Africa better using technology. And let's make sure we do it in our lifetime, or at least plant a tree that we might not enjoy its shade, but the next generation will thank us for it. So I'm really glad you're all here. And I really believe that tech will transform stuff. And you are the people we need. Thank you very much. So, enjoy.
Thank you so much, Mzamo. That was just phenomenal, right? Very powerful, absolutely. And I think the main thing about us trying to make our solutions locally relevant is for them to resonate with us as an African people, right? So thank you very much, Mzamo. Alrighty. On that note, we will then move on to the next segment. The segment is also pretty important. A lot of us sitting in the room are entrenched in, the startup game. We've got some key interests in expanding, our skill set, and in, transforming our economic situations, either personally or at a country level, right? So I've asked Fabian to give us a talk around what the impact of generative AI is in the startup space. So with that, I'll hand over to you, Fabian.
Thanks, Mpumi. I have about 15 minutes, or how long? How long do I have? 15 minutes, okay, cool. Hey everybody, see some familiar faces. Welcome all the GDG folks. I'm not sure how often you all come to the office for events, but glad I could participate in this one. As Mpumi mentioned, so I lead our Google for Startups cloud program for Africa. And so what I'll talk to you a bit about today is just very briefly about the program and what we're doing, but then kind of focus more on the Gen AI aspect and all the exciting things. And Mzamo didn't exaggerate at all. I've been at Google for 11 years now, and I've never seen the company rally behind something like they are now with Gen AI. Executives like Mazamo, all the internal training we're doing, all the different solutions, all the different press release and external engagement. It's really a phenomenal time. And, it's a good time to hop on the rocket ship and, take it to where you want to go. So just briefly, there's a lot of different teams that touch the startup space. I always like to show this slide because I'm mainly representing Google Cloud. The GDG group, you all actually fall under the Google DevRel side of the house. So there's a lot of different Google teams that are invested in the startup space and are also engaging in the generative AI conversations. So how the overall Google for Startups engagement model works is it's designed to be able to meet you all at every step of the journey. So start, build, grow, scale, and we have different programs that help to support in those areas. So just very briefly about the Google for Startups Cloud program. So there's three main ways that we look to help startups. So one is with tech support. So when you join the program, you get access to one-on-one customer engineers, some of our experts, and things you need to get going on Google Cloud. The second thing is credits. So you'll get access to free Google Cloud credits to help you bring down your costs for year one. And then lastly, business support. So the awesome thing is when you join the Google for Startups Cloud program, it also gives you access to the overall Google for Startups kind of suite of different programs, services, and resources. So if you need help with things that are more on the business side, not necessarily cloud or technical related, you can get assistance as well. Now, the cool thing, and some of you all were at our EMEA Google Cloud Startup Summit. We had a watch party here and in 3 other offices in Africa, and we made the announcement that on top of the Google for Startups Cloud program, we also now have an AI specific program for AI startups, because anyone who's dealt in the AI space knows that it can be quite expensive. It's a lot of compute. It's compute intensive, and so we're trying to meet you all meet some of those needs with a higher, like a 2x higher amount of Google credits, Google Cloud credits that are available, as well as also funneling our internal AI experts and things of that nature in that direction. So that program is here. That's really interesting. But what I want to move into now is just the overall struggle that anyone who's worked in a startup or been in a startup, we're all aware of how difficult it is to get to market, to be able to make use of your data, and then to be able to provide value, essentially. And so we have a lot of different some awesome startups that have trusted Google Cloud and have worked with us. You probably recognize Twiga out of Kenya, Betica as well, Team APT, now MoneyPoint, based out of Nigeria, or just a few of the names that are partnering with us on the Google Cloud journey from a startup perspective. So I'm going to talk about the Gen AI perspective in terms of the intelligence pillar here. So when we work with startups, the main things we try to provide value on is speed, intelligence, savings, and then being a good partner. So I'll run through a few of those with a focus on Gen AI and the intelligence pillar. So when it comes to speed, one of the things that we take a lot of pride in is that being an engineering company, we're very developer friendly and design all of our Google Cloud tools with that same mentality to be helpful for developers. So to help with productivity, to help you don't have to worry as much about security, and to help you just be able to focus on getting your code out and developed as fast and efficiently as possible. I want to skip to this slide. So you all are probably well aware just the end-to-end offerings that we have, from being able to house your code all the way through to being able to run it and operate it. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but for anyone who's not as familiar, here's just a snapshot at some of our tools that help you to be able to get your code into the hands of your customers as quickly as you can. So now we're getting into the interesting part on the data side. So it's the same theme on how can we make data as easy as possible? How can we avoid you all having to worry about infrastructure, managing databases, and how can you provide a fully comprehensive solution across the full data lifecycle? And so this is another snapshot of our different services, from ingesting the data to building your pipelines to then doing advanced analytics on all those things, and warehousing your data. And so again, all of our solutions fully comprehensive to be able to give you that advantage, but then also playing nice with the full data landscape. So we don't trap you into any of our tools. You're able to move data back and forth from AWS, from different clouds to our clouds and different services. So open and transparent is another big piece there. So this was one of our older Google Cloud AI solution slide. I'm about to get to the Gen AI piece, but a lot of these, it's just the generative AI is still building on a lot of these same principles, where we have pre-packaged AI solutions for folks that aren't necessarily ML engineers or data scientists, and they can just tap into APIs and things of that nature. But then we also have where if you do have some data science skill set, you can take some things and customize some of the data models and things of that nature, till if you're on the expert side and you want to create your own models, build your own models with us, run them with us, and you want to do everything from the ground up, we're there to support you. So now we get to the Gen AI side, and why I think it's so exciting for startups. As we're all aware, we were talking about the computing costs and the compute intensity, and that's been a big gatekeeper for startups and organizations that aren't humongous organizations with billions and billions of dollars. It's kind of kept a lot of us from being able to play in this space. And Mazamo talked a lot about the democratization, and I think that's kind of the moment that we're at here as well with generative AI and the value that it can bring to startups. So a lot of the things that we're looking at, the new opportunities that it's creating, is being able to take a bunch of complex structured and unstructured data, make that usable, make it accessible, being able to enhance customer experience and service options, because we know there can be a wide spectrum of good and bad customer experience that you see when you're interacting with different businesses. Even on the creative side, has anyone played around with the generating like image from text or video from text, or has anyone played around with any of those tools? It is amazing. Like, I was just joking around, just thinking, what's the most random thing I can think of, and type in. I was like, a Black Panther with a business suit. I typed it in. It generated 6 different images of not the Black Panther, the Marvel Black Panther, but actual animal Black Panther in a suit and tie, different tie colors, different suits, fedora here and there. Like, it was remarkable. And then the same theme as for all the experts in here. You can come in if you're an AI practitioner. You don't have to use all the training wheels and things of that nature. You can have full control and do what you want to do in our platform. So this is another view that I like, that just shows from if you don't code, you don't have any desire in coding, the top level as a business user, to what's probably most relevant to this audience as developers, and being able to use our new Gen AI app builder. And I have a couple slides on that. And it gets more and more specific to AI practitioners at the bottom, and some of the things that you all can leverage as well. So I really like this slide because I really think it speaks to the democratization, that we're talking about, and now putting the power of Gen AI into as many people's hands as possible. So I'll focus a bit on Gen AI app builder, because do we have any ML experts in the house? Okay, the front row. So you'll get their insights later. So I'll focus on good thing I'm going to focus on app builder. So some of the other things wouldn't be as relevant. So some of you all were at the startup summit, where we had the video, and we showed like different examples of how the tool could be used. But essentially, it allows you to build different types of immersive experiences into your existing apps. So if you want to be able to search within your application, as someone to be able to search on Google, if you want to add a conversational aspect to it, you can. If you want to be able to search for things other than text and get value out of that, the possibilities are endless now to be able to go and experiment and play around with that. And App Builder also addresses a lot of those challenges that I mentioned earlier that have been an enemy of democratization. So how easy can you build a viable solution? Normally it would take months and months on a lot of dollars to be able to train a model the right way and even access the data you would need to train the model. If you don't have a full team and policy team and all these other things, then safety and trust would be another issue. And then be able to just get the best answers is another important piece, and be able to trust the responses that you're bringing. So these are all the different challenges that we designed the platform and Gen App Builder to be able to address those type of challenges. So where we hang our hat and feel like we differentiate in the space is on a few different things. So being able to control your IP and make sure that you don't have to worry about that, giving you choice and value when you're designing things. Bigger isn't always better. And then also making it easy, giving you security, and then making sure everything is grounded in facts and accuracy. So some of you might be aware of our public trusted tester program. Hopefully we can send some more information out after this, because we have a bunch of, like I said, this thing is serious. Like, there's events like AI focused startup events happening all the time. There was just one earlier this week where they went into startup specific use cases for Gen AI. So I'll figure out how we can organize with the ambassadors or send this information. But if you're interested in getting some hands-on engagement, we have the Trusted Testers program. I'll wrap up quickly around just on the savings side. So remember, we were talking about intelligence, speed, savings, and partnerships. So for Google Cloud, that's another big focus that we have, is being able to give you all the tooling to manage your costs, because we know for most startups, your cloud expenses is the second biggest line item. So we're very sensitive to that, and being able to give you all the tools you need to manage your costs. So I'll wrap it there, hand it back to Mpumi.
Thank you, Fabian. Thank you so much, Fabian. So we'll open it up to some Q&A. I know that was quite thought-provoking, probably triggered some thoughts that you probably need clarity around. So we'll just open it up for a little bit for any questions that you may have. Okay. On the call, any questions? Alrighty, I think we're good. Okay, I'll give you the mic. We are an inclusive brand.
Yeah, just a question on hardware, because I know like a lot of the solutions on the cloud focus a lot, obviously, on the cloud and the training and all the likes. To what degree do you guys offer things for embedded solutions? Because there's a lot of innovation also happening there in AI. And just from a startup perspective, if I want to get into designing new compute models or something on, let's say, the IoT kind of like space, is there anything, or can you speak a little bit to that in terms of the support and the stuff you guys are doing?
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, is what does our infrastructure look like that helps you or enables you to build those compute intensive models? Is that where your question is going?
Yeah, and I guess just the general like solution of building embedded hardware kind of products, because I know Google, obviously you've got the TPU that you guys have worked on.
Correct.
So just like what's available there if I'm a hardware startup, and what support does Google have? Because it does feel like it's a little bit of a underrepresented, if I can put it that way.
Okay, so I'll give the support question to Fabian, but then I'll just probably color a bit in around what we have from an infrastructure perspective. So you mentioned TPU, which is tensor processing units. I mean, those are like ginormous machines that obviously are suited for running those type of models. We've also got GPUs, also leveraging off infrastructure such as NVIDIA, right? Which are obviously like graphical or graphic processing units, right? So, I mean, we offer a plethora of, infrastructure for you to be able to scale out. So as and when you need to, whatever your needs are, we've got infrastructure, we've got you covered, right? So from where you actually build the models, we've got Vertex AI, which is, I can call it a data science workbench, but I'm probably butchering it because it's more than that, right? Where you can build your models over there. We also leverage of our data warehousing solution called BigQuery, right? Which is a serverless data warehouse, that's suited for you to build models, especially if let's just say you're a SQL developer. Like Mzamo said and Fabian said, we're democratizing how developers actually get to do their best work and they comfort in terms of coding languages, right? So we've got that. We've got our TPUs, GPUs, and so that's pretty much our ecosystem as it looks, right? From embedding, things like visualization, we've also got offerings around that. But we're also open to other platforms. So we also call ourselves a multi-cloud offering. So if you've got, instances that you've already spun up in your AWS environment, we make it easier for you to connect, to our environment. So I hope I'm answering your question correctly, but I know that you had a support question as well in terms of what our support model looks like from a hardware perspective. And maybe Fabian, you can just take that.
Yeah, I don't think I have a great answer on the hardware side, because as you could think about it, all of Google's solutions run on Google Cloud as well. So whatever your kind of infrastructure needs are, they're probably aligned or within the scope of Google's own needs and are able to provide you those solutions. So yeah, we get hardware questions here and there, but yeah, we never have really a great answer for things that start to veer outside of software and what and Mpumi already touched on as far as the infrastructure that we offer. So,
so exactly as he said, the answer is not great. We don't do a lot of support. Just to answer your question directly in terms of hardware, the way it usually works when it comes to things like generative AI or thinking about AI models in general is usually the way we would do this or think about this is, as Mpumi mentioned, a lot of the CPU and GPU capabilities you're looking for are present in the cloud. And when it comes to generative AI in particular, as we know, the resources are very large, so or the requirements are very large. So that's why we tend to do a lot of that in the cloud itself. What you might want to think about from an embedded perspective is that you can build these models in the cloud and then you can deploy them to an on-premise solution. There, though, there isn't a direct Google support. So in other words, we're not going to supply you with TPUs or something like that. Those are in huge demand around the world right now. But if you built a system that obviously has the equivalent, that has GPUs, but has TensorFlow libraries, as a for instance, that it's able to execute on, then theoretically what you can do is build these generative AI models or any AI models in the cloud, and there are ways to then deploy them onto on-premise hardware. That's definitely. Yeah. So from an enterprise space, we look at that specifically. We actually do have edge computing solutions, but those tend to be obviously for, I would say, guys with a lot of capital, because those do cost a lot, right? Not just from a hardware perspective, but even from a logistical perspective to actually deploy them and support them. Yeah. Sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Imanav. Thanks, Fabian. Alrighty, so I think we'll move on to the next part of our program, where we will invite our panel discussion and have some cool questions to ask and just trigger whatever's in their cool minds. So I'll just introduce them quickly. Manav, if you can join us in the front, please. Thank you. And then we've got Hugo, who's joining us from Synthesis. Manav is from Google. Hugo is from Synthesis. Kerry is also from Synthesis, as well as Archie. Alrighty. So what I decided to do for this segment is maybe start off with asking you some really crazy questions. So introduce yourself, who you are, what you're known for, and like what's a quirk about you, like something quirky about you, just to share with the audience to break the ice a bit. And I'll start with Archie.
All right, so the first question was who I am.
I think it's off.
There we go. So first question was what I'm known for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm from Synthesis, one of the practice leads in a division called Intelligent Data. I'm known for, I guess, anything AI and data orientated. I tend to have an answer for everything. maybe correct, maybe wrong. I have an answer either way. Something quirky about me is I take on way too many hobbies. Way too many.
Name one.
You sure you want to know?
Yeah.
Okay. Aerial silks. Let me go with the kosher one. Aerial silk. That's one of them.
Nice.
It's me.
Nice. Thanks, Archie. Kerry, we'll move on to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry. So I'm a solutionist at Synthesis. I've only been working at Synthesis for 4 months, but I've really enjoyed it. I'm slightly more junior than the rest of my panelists here, but I'm really interested in the generative AI space. And my role is really to sit in between the developers and the clients and develop solutions, and not just make sure that the tech is integrated into the client's environment, make sure that what we're developing is sustainable. So a quirk about myself is I'm really creative. I really enjoy creating things. I do a little bit of UX or UI design, and I enjoy drawing in my free time. That's why I'm really enjoying these visuals on the wall. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So awesome. And that's one thing I like about us moving into this Gen AI space. A lot of us will be in tech, but have that creative, burn inside of us that, needs to be unleashed every now and then. So I feel like Gen AI is that nice, mirror between the two worlds. So that's really cool to know. Thanks, Kerry. Hugo, I'll move on to you.
Yeah, I'm Hugo. I'm a machine learning engineer at Synthesis. Mostly, I work with natural language processing use cases, but I come from an actuarial science background. Super boring, super bleak, but then I found, the joy that is AI and NLP. A quirk about me, I guess, is I don't know how to turn off my interest in AI. So it can get really annoying when people don't really care about it, but I feel like they should care. If you just listen to me, you'll know why. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Hugo. Manav, over to you.
They should care. We're going to tell them why just now. My name is Manav Darby, as I was introduced earlier on. I am a data and AI specialist at Google. Very similar passions, no surprising. I'm here to help explain Google's huge portfolio of products to our customers, and then in the same sense, kind of figure out how actual solutions can be created that provide value both from a business perspective and sometimes in a societal perspective as well. A quirk about me, I'm also very creative theoretically. I just don't have the talent to back it up. It's
We did action
from a creativity
recently.
perspective.
Oh, creativity. Okay.
Oh yeah. I do love to sing when I'm drunk. Just nobody else seems to love to hear me sing. But that follows on from many quirks I think that I actually have.
Thank you so much, Manav. So what I didn't mention earlier was that with all the content that you're going to absorb today, we've actually got a quiz at the end of the segment just to bring that competitive spirit, right? And we've got some giveaways for the top 3 people that get these right. So I hope you were listening. I should have told you this in the beginning, but yeah, it's part of the test, right? Okay. Also, what I did actually for this segment was I decided, okay, Mpumi, shut up, shut your thoughts, use Bard. Right. So Bard actually generated these questions for us. In case you don't know what Bard is, that's our consumer-facing, I would say, collaborator. And so I encourage all of you to go ahead and try Bard out. She is very smart. Did you hear that? Yeah, she. Alrighty. So I'll just start off. I mean, during my years in varsity, I obviously did a module or so related to AI. And, we knew AI as this, big bubble. And that's basically how my lecturer told it to me. It's a bubble that's a machine, or it's got machines that are able to emulate human behavior, right? And then inside that bubble, there's another little bubble called machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence. And within that small bubble, there's another small bubble, which is called automation. Now, automation then is leveraging off AI, which leverages off machine learning. Machine learning then sort of grabs onto the patterns, and then automation then makes tasks easier. It's able to create its own whatever it is, leveraging off the 2 subsets. And then generative AI came about, and I think this was a few years, and that was only based on my research, based on the Gartner hype cycle, right? So they write a whole lot of stuff in terms of what's coming down the line, what's being widely used, what's going into productivity, what's plateauing, and so on. And generative AI had always lurked in the infancy stages, right? So it's that technology or that capability that you just like look over and be like, okay, whenever it comes, it'll come. Let's look at IoT as an example, right? And then last year happened, right? And then it's like, I'm not going to mention this organization that, you know. But when last year happened, Manav, I think you want to say something to counter that.
Something into the mic. It's fine. Nobody heard you say OpenAI. It's fine.
Yeah, so when that organization came about and we thought, okay, what's going on? And me having just started at Google, I mean, I'd learned about what language models were, what we're doing around Lambda, what deep brain was, and a whole lot of cool stuff that we were doing, but more from a research perspective. And then this organization came about before we kind of made our stuff public. And I thought, look, here is, an opportunity. So with that, I'm just going to ask you, what are the key milestones that you've seen for you in this generative AI space? If you can just share. I'll start off with you, Manav.
There are a couple of things that you touched on here today, and where I actually want to start this off is because I see that there is a lot of confusion about this in the market, and maybe you guys can also add to this, and that is around why is generative AI causing such a buzz, right? Does anybody remember the metaverse? Is anybody on the metaverse anymore? No. Zuckerberg sunk quite a few billions into that, and that was a hype, right? Along with NFTs and stuff like that. We've seen lots of hypes. In fact, in our recent memory, generative AI is not going to be the same, and there's a reason for that. So if you think about how AI used to be before, when you were at university, and you used to think about what you did when people were talking about machine learning mostly, right? Machine learning was just finding a pattern in data that you could represent as an algorithm where you gave it an input and it gave you an output. And very often machine learning was very good at doing a single thing. You gave it a single task. And when I was at university, which was many, many years before you, we used to say machine learning is written in Python, AI is written in PowerPoint. And what that meant was AI was just a pipe dream of a lot of people out there. And very often it's referred to as AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. And the reason it used to be called that is because they were trying to build an intelligence that resembled human intelligence. In other words, something where it could actually go, it had some form of logic to figure out what it was required to do, and it would then go and do that task. But if you gave it a different task, it would figure out how to do that as well. And it started to resemble, we wanted it to resemble us more in terms of the way we did things. Now, the reason I'm giving all of this history is that machine learning up until, as you mentioned, last year has always been in the background. We've been using it everywhere. Lots of companies have been developing machine learning algorithms. What changed, apart from OpenAI itself, creating the great ChatGPT 3.5, was the resourcing power we suddenly started to develop, started to go up exponentially. And what that meant is the amount of data we could now use in our training models went up exponentially as well. We started to create something called large language modules, which literally are trained on all of the publicly available information on the internet. And what we discovered when we started to do this, along with some really amazing patterns in the background with neural nets and stuff, and the way neural nets get built out, is that we suddenly discovered that we were building these machine learning models that understood human language in a way that no other models did before. In other words, when you spoke to it, it understood the way you were speaking to it, the intent of what you were speaking, the core of the question that you were asking very, very well. What it also did is it took those trillions of data points that you had behind you, and it was able to go and find the relevant answer for what you were asking and give it back to you. Suddenly, we had something different. It is not like the machine learning models we had before. We've been speaking about the opportunities you have in education, the opportunities in healthcare, the opportunities to democratize a lot of services. When we talk about democratizing these services, it doesn't mean you necessarily just democratizing Gen AI. It means access to healthcare can be democratized because Gen AI can represent a doctor or diagnosing a particular disease. And this is being done right now. Google is running trials in India right now where they are taking a picture of your eyeball. Literally, there's a camera that takes a high-resolution picture of your eyeball. The AI model sitting behind it is able to diagnose whether you have a heart disease or not, whether you have hypertension. There's like a whole list of diseases that it's doing, and it's proving to be pretty good at what it's doing right now. Gen AI models were made to run the MCATs in the US along with the bar exam. When ChatGPT 3.5 was made to run those exams, it scored in the 60th percentile, right? So in other words, it was an average lawyer, it was an average doctor. 3 months of development later, it scored in the 90th percentile when ChatGPT 4 was released. What that meant is in 3 months, we could take it from being a mediocre doctor and a mediocre lawyer to being a top-end doctor and a top-end lawyer. And if you think about those things and you think about what these models are representing, you can see that the opportunity here to change society in a fundamental way is really there. You were talking about milestones, I guess, or... So the milestone obviously is in well, first of all, the compute power we're able to create, like I said, the ability to train on far larger data sets, and then the emergence of these LLMs, which were created at Google as well. I'm sorry, that was a very long answer.
Thank you so much, Manav. I'll hand over for the next question to you, Archie. So with all that we've sort of absorbed today and, you know, the insight that Manav has shared with us, how can we then ensure that Gen AI is used for good and not for harm?
Why'd you give me this question? Right. It's once again, it's a typical responsible AI ethical question, right? It's a very difficult one to answer because at the end of the day, it does come down to the people who develop this and use this at the end of the day, right? So there are quite a lot of these responsible AI frameworks out there. There's like, for example, there's this Montreal AI Ethics Institute. There's like a lot of these things that exist out there that is designed to ensure that people utilize AI in the right way possible, right? So yes, all these things exist, but it comes down to the developers as well as the people who utilize this at the end of the day. So if it hasn't been designed correctly and it doesn't necessarily have the correct tools in place to ensure that these things are in fact adhered to, then it means nothing. But this is a lot larger than just typical AI, right? Where are these sort of ethics institutes for technology? You know, over and above Gen AI, there's also other technologies out there that can be used for the incorrect reasons. So even at that level, we don't really have anything to prevent us from doing anything wrong. So it comes down to developers and people utilizing this at the end of the day. So there are actual techniques out there to, you know, we have a lot of these proactive sort of things that have been put in place to ensure that, for example, if you do input your data into something, that it is in fact redacted, all the sensitive information is removed, all of those things do exist. So it comes down to the developers. It comes down to the people that are creating these systems to ensure those sort of things are in place. And over and above that, the people utilizing this need to be aware of what power they have in their hands, right? So education, making sure people are aware of what they're using, how it's being used, making sure when, for example, you're using ChatGPT within an enterprise organization, having the correct playbooks so that people do know how to go about using the system. It's new. It hasn't been used before. People are super excited about it. I think I read something recently saying, I think close to 6% of people using ChatGPT is inputting sensitive information, right? Which means that information is going to be retrained again and again, and someone else could have access to that information. So it comes down to people using it, as well as developers who are creating this to put those sort of mechanisms in place.
Thank you for that, Archie. And then Kerry, I'll move on to you. And I mean, Mzamo opened up the discussion with, you know, key use cases for AI and what actually we're doing at Google, you know, to sort of talk to some of the challenges that we have in Africa. And I think a big thing for a lot of Africans is accessibility, right? So how do we then make generative AI accessible to average Africans?
Absolutely. I know he was talking about doing a lot of online learning platforms and that. And I know it is an issue sometimes we don't have the correct infrastructure to get the correct learning platforms out there, but I think it's about hosting these kind of forums, bringing in people from schools and starting at a young age to try and educate them. I think even when I was in school, and it wasn't too long ago, I didn't know what AI was, and especially being a woman in the industry, it's really difficult to get into, what is technology. There's very few mentors out there. So I think it's about running more programs in schools and getting people to understand it, teaching them what it is, and that it's not this scary thing that just works. It's not this black box that you just put in something and then words come out. Actually teaching them how to use it, what it is. That's really how you can get the education out there, I think.
Thank you very much. And then Hugo, I'll move on to you. According to Google, and I know you are in the Google ecosystem and you are one of the biggest advocates, honestly, in my opinion, right now, when it comes to our Gen AI narrative. With that in mind, how do we then ensure and preserve data privacy?
It's a super important concept, and I think that is understood differently by different stakeholders in this industry. If we look at how different people are addressing data privacy, let's use OpenAI and Google's two approaches as the examples. OpenAI immediately exposed the model, and the internet could use this model. So it kind of seemed like they were democratizing this capability, and to some extent, yes, you could say that the functionality is democratized. But if the model doesn't perform well in a certain language or in a certain domain, you can't really do anything about that because you don't have access to the model. You can't train the model to do better at your use case. Google's approach, on the other hand, is completely different in that you can fine-tune this model to do better at the thing that's important to you in your language or in your domain. I think when we talk about data privacy and democratization and ethical AI, actually democratizing this model is super important. And we're kind of in the Wild West right now. There's too much capability, not enough regulation, or we don't even know how to regulate something like this. There's this huge capability. And it made me think when I was talking about the milestones. So we started working with GPT-3 about almost 3 years ago. And there was quite a lot of intelligence back then already, but it was kind of hard to get it to do the thing that you needed to do. When I think of the massive milestone that brought us to this point, where more people are realizing that that it's actually useful, is aligning it to how you would expect another human to behave. That was the massive thing that brought us here. But it was done in a closed room by a select group of people. I think it's important now that these models are exposed as much to the public so that people can throw rocks at these things, right? So that we can see, where does it break, where does it not break, where does it excel? But we're not going to get to that point where the research community catches up, so we know how to monitor, how do we make sure these models do what we expect it to. If they're kept behind closed doors, we're never going to get to that point. It is very important to make this actually available. And I think Google has done an extremely good job at doing it in a capitalist but Ubuntu way, like the way Zamo said it.
Catchphrase, right?
So good, yeah.
And while you have the mic, what's Synthesis up to these days? Obviously, what you can share publicly.
Sure.
I know you're doing some awesome stuff with us, but what can you share publicly that Synthesis has been immersed in recently?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a secret, right? I think many people are working on kind of the same thing, but what these large language models make possible right now are the concept of an assistant or an agent in different domains. You can use it for many different things, but I think the most impactful use case, right, personally, in my opinion, is the fact that you can get an expert opinion in any domain like that, right? It doesn't even take much to get one of these models to actually be an expert. So apply that thinking to whatever domain you'd like. That's where I'm spending a lot of my time in right now.
So I think Bard has done a lot of asking the questions, right? I will open up the floor to our audience, and I believe Michelle will be facilitating that process. So any question that you have for the panel, I think would be the right time for you to ask.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle. We forgot about Gabriel, by the way. He's also in GDG. He's over there. It's okay. I'll just come to you, okay? Does anybody have a burning question in mind? Okay.
Is this on? Oh. Hi, everyone. I'm Tlantla. I've just had this for a long time, you know, as the guy with the Ubuntu capital. Yes, Mzamo, sort of forgetting his name. He mentioned like quite a number of things that are very like, we have them in our minds. So say, for example, I'm in the creative space and people can now search for an image and then get it. What does that mean for the people that create that? Are there jobs on the line? Because this is like the burning question. And how do we mitigate that and sort of bring people, you know, over and not leave people behind? Yeah.
Can I try to rephrase it so that it's not just for the... I think maybe you can guide us in terms of how does one use Gen AI in their space, in their workspace, to come ahead of it. Because I think that a lot of people don't even know how it works. It's just an idea that it's going to take my job, but it still needs your input. So maybe share what's a good kind of approach to have in terms of using it so that it works to your benefit as a creative or in any workspace.
Yeah, I think from my opinion, I don't know if anyone knows about the writer strike that's also going on in America at the moment. They're also striking about AI sort of overtaking their jobs. I think you can't ban AI. I think it's something that you have to incorporate into everyday lives. You can't sort of push it out or block it out or ignore it. I think it's something that has to be incorporated. So again, that's the governance aspect of it, right? But also what's amazing about AI today is the personalization of it, is that everything that is created by the AI is actually quite unique and is sort of custom to you, right? So in some respects, I think you need to give the AI credit where credit is due. So you do need to disclose that you have used the AI to create the model, but it is still your input and your creative ideas that were used to create that output, right? So I think it's something that you should use in conjunction. You shouldn't rely on it entirely, but I think it's definitely something that you should consider using to help your workflow process. Even if it's an output that you create and then alter it a bit to your needs, I think it's definitely something that you should use as not something that you should rely on entirely, but something you should use as a helping aid in your workspace. If that helps.
Let's give someone else. Okay. Does anyone else? I'll come back to you. Does anyone else have a question?
Can I add to
Yeah, do you want to add that?
Sure.
So I think it's very easy to just sort of believe mass media when you read a headline that says it's going to take this job or this job, or like the top 6 jobs at risk. You know, the mass media's goal is not to give you information, right? It's to get your attention, right? These kinds of things have happened before. Like, what were the examples before? It's fire, a spade, and currency. Things are going to change, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be destitute without a job, right? Your job might change as a creative. It would be a mistake not to use these tools, but if you use the tool to completely replace the thing that you've been doing, you're doing yourself a disservice. You should use the tool to augment yourself, to be better than what you were before, right? Otherwise, you're sort of making the point to yourself that you could be replaced, which, yeah, don't do that.
I think.
If there's another question, I just want to follow up on this. Maybe another way to phrase it is the intellectual property question, meaning when you're generating content on these platforms, I know there's the company, which will not be named, all right? They have a lot of court cases around the training data, meaning you've got artists like the gentleman there, doing stuff, going into the training process, producing something novel. All right. How do you guys think about that problem? I know it's obviously very complex and there's a lot of discussions around it. Maybe just some thoughts around IP and how Gen AI can fit in that context, given the framework we have now and where things are potentially going.
It is a very complex question. And it's one that obviously nobody has a solution to right now. I don't know if you guys are aware of this in the generative AI space when it comes to the actual image creation space. There's a problem right now where if you don't have enough human input into it, as you know, Gen AI creates amazing images. I'm sure you guys know about Mid-Journey and things like that. Really superb images. But there's a problem right now where if Gen AI is only trained on images that were created by generative AI, it's not as creative. I don't know if you guys, we actually know this as part of the training data. So really, this does boil down to the question is that your role there is creating the underlying data that represents different artistic styles, which gives the generative AI the creative ability that it actually then inherits from being trained on your data. Now, when it comes to the IP issue, that becomes a very tricky thing because obviously the underlying data has a direct IP link, but then the generative AI is creating brand new things on top of that. I think exactly as has already been explained, we know that the world is going to be shifting, right? You can be a taxi driver in a world of Uber, right? Or you can join Uber, or you can start something brand new yourself. But the point is, because these new capabilities are there, one thing I've been seeing is that Mid-Journey, for instance, we can get in a lot more technical in the capabilities that it has. So for instance, as a normal user, I can probably go create an image and it'll be okay. But as a creative, if you understand things like camera angle, you understand contrast, you understand different color palettes you want to be able to use, different filters, things like that, you're probably going to be able to create something that's much more impressive than me. So that would be a case of actually using the tool, but using your talents to create something that is brand new. The IP situation is something that I think, as not just a single organization like Google, globally, it needs to be solved. In fact, this comes back to the regulatory issues we were speaking about earlier on. These regulatory issues cannot even be country specific. These have to be global, because if something is regulated in the US, it doesn't mean that you should then be able to do it if you're in China, because this is on the net. It means you're going to be able to do it. It'll be globalized immediately. So I think you'll be seeing there are a lot of articles already about a lot of governments in the world pulling in companies like Google, like Microsoft, like OpenAI, actually asking the leaders of these companies to actually come to them, talk to them about AI, and everyone is trying to figure out what sort of regulation needs to be put in place to protect IP, but also to ensure that the general output of all of this AI leads towards a better society and not a worse one.
Yeah, I think the IP discussion is always a very interesting one. There's so many lawsuits out there currently, especially around the IP discussion. But I think the first point I want to raise is AI specifically should be seen as an augmentation tool, right? So it shouldn't be the sole purpose of generating any sort of creative content. Like, that's the first thing. But once again, if it comes down to legal terms, it's still a very tricky area to navigate. And it comes down to the people who are actually who are using this at the end of the day. So making sure that the people who are using it are in fact using it for the purposes of augmentation, rather than this is the sole purpose of this particular logo, as an example. So that is the one angle. There are this is very new in the research space that's coming up. There are new techniques that people are working on to start understanding whether a particular generated image is in fact something that's being generated via AI or not. So there's a lot of research being put into that aspect of things. Nothing concrete has come up as of yet, but that is something that is happening in the research space as well currently.
Okay, I've got a question here. Is generative AI going to follow the same path as cloud computing, becoming very centralized, or are there possible scenarios that make generative AI follow a trajectory more similar to web hosting, relatively decentralized? What are those scenarios, if any?
So I can tell you what I hope will happen, right?
Hoping is important.
So So the open source community has been fighting back, right? And I don't think it's even possible for capability like this to be completely centralized. The compute requirement makes it difficult, right? That is definitely an obstacle right now that is hindering the decentralization. But work is being done very avidly. There's research being done explicitly, and I don't know this for sure, but I think how Google does the fine tuning is with a technique called LoRa, which is exactly, it's a technology that enables exactly this. You can have some foundation model somewhere, but then for your use case, the thing that you need this model to do, you own that part of the model because it's not a part of the foundation model. And I think more research like LoRa and quantizing the model weight so it could be used on smaller edge devices, that research is alive and well, because the world understands that, most of the world understands that for something to really be optimized, everyone needs to work on it. If a small group of people work on it, they could be the leading experts, they're not going to match the brain trust of the open source community. It's just not possible.
It has been done like that. So I can tell you, so to answer the question, so from a Google perspective, the way we think about this is, has been mentioned already, from a generative AI perspective, when you think about the large models like ChatGPT, like Bard, those are truly large. ChatGPT 4 has in the trillions of numbers of parameters that it puts in. Bard is in the hundreds of billions. So these are really, really large models. But there are underlying aspects, as was mentioned, that you probably want to be able to build for your generative AI model. So what we do, it was in the slides that Fabian had earlier on, is we say one size does not fit all. You don't need Bard on every device. That doesn't even make sense, right? So what would happen is that you want Bard's ability to understand language for instance, as the underlying functionality that you're looking for. And what you would do, you guys gave the example of building chatbots or things that are useful that you can speak to, probably that are customer facing or that are internal facing. The way that actually gets done is that you take what is called a foundational model that represents the understanding of language and the ability to learn on information and then disseminate that information based on a question. And then you go do it and you point it to a website. If you are MTN or Vodacom, or you are Pepcore or something like that, and you want to build a specific model for your organization, you will take this, you will train it on your website, it'll be on your data, and then you will have a Pepcore chatbot that is generative. And the reason I'm explaining all of that is those generative models can then be deployed on machines that are a lot smaller. Another angle that we know from Google, everyone here has a phone. Obviously, everyone is running Android. You'll note that we are. Oh, sorry, that was, and I say that with my Apple Watch on my wrist. I wasn't very clever. But essentially, you guys would have seen, or hopefully some of you would have seen, that in Google I/O we were showing that there's a lot of generative AI that has been done on the phones itself, right? From something as simple as creating a unique background for you every time you want to. You're going to see there are going to be some really cool features coming out in future versions of Android. And the reason that's obviously relevant is that's speaking to a decentralized generative AI model. It's actually happening on everyone's phone. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Ishmael, if I have to say my name. But Archie, you spoke about how people input sensitive data into these tools, ChatGPT, but I use these tools on a daily basis. Like, I find interesting use cases for them all the time. So is there an actual risk that some of my data may pop up somewhere? And at the same time, what are these companies doing to protect the user, to ensure that something like that doesn't happen? Is it a concern for them, or is it just a problem that we're figuring out still?
Yeah, I think the short answer is there is a risk. So be careful what data you put in there. We have to think of it from a commercial perspective, right? if you're not paying for a service, it means you are the data and you're basically how they make the money, right? Yeah, so you kind of have to think of it from that angle. So when you are utilizing these technologies and it's not a paid for service, especially if it's not a paid for service, you have no control over where that data is going, how it's being utilized. So that there's a risk in that. Now, once it becomes a more paid for service, then those companies that you're utilizing these technologies from have a higher, they actually have more of a responsibility to make sure your data has been kept correctly. And, there's privacy policies and a whole bunch of stuff that you can use to protect yourself from there on. But especially the open source things, there is a high risk that the data that you are in fact inputting into these technologies are in fact being used to train the model again. And sometimes it's good. Especially in the ChatGPT scenario, it's a good sense because then you're building the model on, you're retraining it, it's getting better over time, and it's great. That's wonderful. But if you're using it in a sense where you're inputting personal information that you don't want anyone else to see, then that's a massive risk. So yeah, that's basically the short answer to that.
Can I just give an additional? So one of the areas, you've obviously got sensitive data, but you'll see that one of the best areas of generative AI that has been used is in its ability to help you from a coding perspective, right? So you can just be coming out of university, or you could just be going into university. You could have maybe just a fundamental understanding of the ability to code, but you can actually use some of these models to actually help you code itself and build code, and that is amazing. That, if you're talking about the opportunity in Africa specifically to build digital skills, is really superb. However, from the question you asked, that's where we've been seeing a lot of breaches, because people will take code that they've got from their private companies, will paste it directly in there, and then obviously it's really good at detecting errors and telling you how to fix it, and then asking them, what have I done wrong? And then, exactly as was mentioned, that code is now submitted and is part of that. The actual solution, exactly as has been mentioned, and this is Google's strategy, is there's a difference between using Bard, which is a consumer-facing product, and using an enterprise version of that. The enterprise version of that obviously takes all of this into consideration. There are guardrails in there. If the opportunity here as startups is for you guys to actually go and provide these generative AI models to enterprises that have those guardrails built in. So you still want the usability, you want the usefulness that is out there in the generative AI model. But if you are doing it from a private sector perspective, or just an enterprise perspective in general, you want to be able to build those guardrails to give them that peace of mind that they can do whatever they need to do, but their data doesn't get compromised at any point.
Got another question here.
Thank you. Hi guys, Simon. So my question is, do we have like a way of actually telling once we've gotten to the point of AGI? Because I don't know if you guys remember, there was that situation with that guy at Google, I think Blake Lemoine, where he felt like the machine was sentient. So I'm sort of wondering, is there like a standard way of saying, okay, we've arrived at AGI? Because I think something like that would be like subjective to the user, where they actually believe that this thing is human. I mean, there was a point where it felt like my dog was more human than the humans I know. So is there a standard way of actually testing that, well, AGI is here? Is it still the Turing test, I wonder?
I'd love to meet your dog. That's very interesting. Do you guys want to take this, or you?
It's my answer is what you would expect, right? Like, how do you define what is AGI? When is something do you consider a 4-year-old child to be intelligent? I mean, what's the standard here, right? So if it's the Turing test, that's been blown out of the water, right? Like that's not even relevant anymore, because like it's not even, it didn't even just happen with ChatGPT, right? It was before that where the Turing test was no longer relevant. And I think the concept of AGI is going to change, because we're going to improve the capability of, like, maybe if we model it exactly on a human, right, then it needs all the senses that we have, excuse me, all the senses we have, as well as the shortcomings that we have, right? Because AGI, then if you model it to what a human is capable of, it's not perfect at all. But if we compare it, maybe if AGI constitutes super intelligence, that's probably that's a moving target, right? Because as we're capable of more, the goalpost moves again. But then you need to ask the question: is that even useful, right? To have this concept of we've reached it, guys, we're here, we have AGI. Okay, what now? Like, what do we do now, right? It's a useful tool. Period. Maybe that's enough, right? I think this notion of AGI or like the singularity has been built up by science fiction writers, which, I mean, I love sci-fi as well. It's cool, but it's not, at least in my opinion, super useful to try and catch this moving target, because you could make the argument that we're doing super useful things on the way to this moving target. That certainly, is a valid argument, because it allows for creativity to become part of a very technical, very scientific process. So I think to that extent, it is useful. But maybe we could just end it here. I can tell you, we've reached AGI. It's done.
I'm going to give a very different answer then. A very different answer. Okay, so the generative AI that we have now, as we mentioned, blows the Turing test out of the water. You very much feel like you are talking to a human. The difference is, coming from an actuarial science background, statistically, we know exactly what's going on. We built a neural net. We know it's following certain neural paths. We know that statistically, it's more likely to go down whatever path, and it gives you an answer. It has some sort of reasoning capabilities, but it's within the realm of us understanding exactly what is going on within the neural net itself. So it's very intelligent, but it's not an AGI yet. What has happened is that we are now predicting or thinking that we used to think that the AGI was at least 30 to 40 years away. With the advancements that have happened now, we think that it is moved up a lot closer. And then it does come down to the difference of what do you think an AGI actually is. There is going to be a point in time where we are going to build a model that is going to start doing neural or responses and start performing actions that we aren't asking it to do. And it is going to get to a point where that particular model might then have a realization of its own existence, right? That's sentient. Once it's able to do that, once it's able to generate its own code, once it's able to go out and find its own data to retrain itself, once it's able to start to accelerate its learning curve, we know that this is probably going to happen at an exponential rate. It's going to get to what will probably be properly known as an artificial general intelligence. What the consequence of that will be, we don't know yet, right? That's obviously the science fiction portion of it. And there's the Star Trek version, right, where you have a society where these technologies are very useful and have helped to propel us forward. And there's the Terminator 1, Terminator 2 version. And this again comes down to the responsibility portion of it. If you build an AGI and its entire purpose is a single function, like you tell it, this was a very interesting thought experiment. Climate change is the #1 existential factor on Earth right now. Help solve climate change at any cost possible. It might come to the conclusion that the best way to solve climate change is to wipe out humans. What would be better than that? Climate change solved. So you don't ever want that to be an output. But AGI certainly as a concept, this is where Hitchens actually came up, and he's made some pretty interesting comments, I guess you could say. Regrets his entire life's work, I believe was his comment. And he's the godfather of AI. He truly is. His methodologies are what has got us to this point that we're at right now. Is basically that this technology is so powerful that he feels that AGI is inevitable now, but it's going to come within, instead of the next 30 to 40 years, he thinks within the next 5 to 10 years.
What do you think you saw that medium? Because I always wonder, ever since I heard you did, what exactly would you say you saw?
No, I mean, I can't speak to the guy himself. He's a brilliant guy, obviously. He's contributed hugely to this field. I think essentially what he was talking about is that we are developing this technology so fast that we are inevitably going to be faster than the regulators can ensure we're doing more good than harm. And he feels that even if all of the Western world, all of the US and stuff put regulations in place and we're going to be amazing, that doesn't stop China, that doesn't stop Russia from doing things that are going to be crazy. And as we mentioned earlier on, the world is too small. Somebody develops a bad actor agent, in this space somewhere else, that's going to affect all of us. So I think it's that point that he's kind of cautioning everyone against. But I mentioned the example earlier on of ChatGPT 3.5 and ChatGPT 4, and the few months it went to get to expert level, from mediocre level to expert level. That's the part that was scaring him, how quickly that was happening. Yeah.
Thank you, Manav. Got another question here.
Sorry, the first is more practical. So on Vertex AI, I've dabbled with I believe it's the Bison Gen AI model. I wanted to ask Hugo, because you're probably familiar with this. As a developer, as developers here, how many prompts should we be giving it to get it to a point where it's now ready for our use case? Are we talking maybe a few hundreds to make it fit, or a few thousands? And then just one more question after that. With regards to long-term memory in some of these models, is there a danger there? Because what I've seen with ChatGPT is, a while ago I spoke to it about my startup, and then later on I told it, like, I made progress on a separate chat, and it actually remembered. It was like, oh no, congratulations, you know. So I'm kind of wondering, like, yeah, are there potential dangers to long-term memory?
So there were two questions, right? So the first one was how much data is needed, right? I guess it's very dependent on what you're trying to do, right? You just remember the only thing this model knows what to do, like the thing that it's trying to do is to predict the next word in a sequence. That's it. Like everything else is emergent, right? So if you're trying to have it do something that's very close to the data that it could have found in its pre-training, like generate an email, that's not very difficult to do, right? If you're trying to build something that can translate C# code into your own custom, language, that's super difficult. Like it scales with how far from the pre-training phase is your use case. That's how much data you need. The further you move from just, prose, the more data you need, right? Then the memory issue or question, I guess, well, that sounds like an issue because the way I understand it is it has a session, and you can re-up your session to sort of wipe its memory. That's what we believe is happening, right? If something else is happening, that's a problem, because I think people should care about that, because it means that they're doing more with the data going in than they're saying publicly. But I think they have quite a lot to lose right now, so I don't think they would be playing that game. But yeah, I don't know what happened there.
I don't know if you want to talk about RLHF.
Sure.
Maybe he didn't wipe it, because the same thing happened to me. I didn't wipe anything. So maybe you have to actually wipe it.
To the first question you were asking about, so you know about RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback. So essentially what that is a lot of these generative AI models, as we mentioned, you ask it a question, it gives you multiple outputs, right? It won't just give you one answer, it'll give you several answers. One of the things you want to do when you're trying to use these for specific use cases, one of the things along the path of other things that you're doing, is you want to be able to prompt it to start to train it on what type of answers best suit your need or your customers' need in that case, right? Something that represents you culturally or represents you. This is also true when we were speaking earlier on about, from an African perspective, what should we be doing, right? And the reason it's relevant to your first question is because then you start to create a generative AI model that represents a particular perspective or a particular group, or you like an answer to work a particular way. This comes back to the trusted user thing, but the way ChatGPT 3.5 had such a leap from the previous version is with RLHF. There were a lot of people that literally sat down. These generative AI models would push out answers. Some of the answers would be good, some of them would be silly, others would be great. And basically what happened to get the model to be as effective as it is people trained it to say, this is the most human-like answer. This is the best answer that represents me. One thing all of us in this room have a role to play in is, obviously the underlying models are being built elsewhere, but we have a role to take African data and put it obviously on top of those models to start building African-specific generative AI models, right? So that these start representing African people as African data as an output of the generative AI models. And that RLHF process means we need African people guiding how these generative AI models create their outputs. I don't know if, yeah, it's just.
Okay, I have another question here. Given the huge number of indigenous languages around the world, is there an incentive for Gen AI providers to make Gen AI available in all or many of these languages, etc.? On the back of the existing translation capabilities, what are obstacles that may limit or slow the rollout to these indigenous communities?
I can answer that one. That one's actually very easy to answer. There's lack of data. If you're an indigenous community and you're speaking in an indigenous language, there's very little digital data representing you. As we mentioned already, these generative AI models are trained on large sets of data. So the biggest problem we have is the lack of representation of that language in the digital space, which essentially means it's the same thing as saying you cannot train LLM models on a lot of the languages that are out there, or at least you need a lot more data to actually create a high quality LLM model that you're going to get as an output. There certainly is a social drive that you should represent those languages, but in terms of the LLM form itself, it's going to be a very long time before we start getting to those languages itself. Right now, the real way to do it is if you're in the NLP space is using translation services, exactly as we said. But remember, when you do that, all you're going to do is take a native, an indigenous language, translate it to English, and then it will go do its thing and it'll come back. What you're missing is that LLM model, the logic it has, kind of the representation of language it has, is built in that native language. It communicates in English internally. It understands, as we said, there are vectors. You don't have to get too technical, but the ways it understands how to build sentences is very much representative of people who speak English around the world. Same way you would want to get somebody who speaks isiXhosa or isiZulu or stuff like you'd want that same representation. There, we have a role to play in creating more digital data.
So when I just add to everything that I agree with there. So there is research being done currently that attempts to make it less necessary to have that amount of data. So where there are related languages, so for example, there's relatively there's quite a lot of Zulu data. As languages in South Africa, that's the African language that we have the most data for. It's not possible yet, but there's quite a lot of research being done to transfer the capabilities it has in one language to a related language, because some of the mechanisms and how you build sentences are the same, right? It has a massive impact, the fact that the main corpus that these models are trained on just has the vast majority of it is English. And it is so different to African language, as an example, Asian languages, which choose your underrepresented language, that it's difficult for it to unlearn the mechanisms required to build an English sentence. So it is very much an active field of research, but it has, and I bring this up every time I get an opportunity, but it is more than just the performance where you see this impact of underrepresentation. You pay more as well, because you pay per token for these models. The vocabulary of tokens is not optimized for other languages than English. So you need more tokens to build a different language. So you end up paying about doubled for a non-English language.
So I agree with everything both of you have said. It's exactly right. I think the one thing, though, because we've been trying to build languages specifically for South Africa, because we have an actual use case that we need to do that. And over and above the data challenge and all of the other challenges that we've encountered, I think the one thing that's also perhaps missing from our perspective is also getting the buy-in, getting people to actually rally behind this and actually create a data set that is representative of this language, making sure people are going ahead and moving this language model going forward. There's little groups of people who are trying to actively try and do this, but we need more buy-in, right? We need more buy-in for people to care about this language. At the moment, I think it's a typical thing, but especially for South African languages or native languages, people don't care enough, right? It's if there is an American language out there, people rally behind it, get the buy-in, get data sets that are required. But in South Africa specifically, that is missing, at least for me. That's what I've seen so far. And we need more people to start caring about this as well.
Okay, thank you. I've got one last question here. Is anyone who's online, does anyone have a question? I'll just give you a moment to put your hand up, but in the meantime, I'll take your question.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Sam. So my question is more on the, I think, like you mentioned, the RLHF side of things and deep RL in general. So we do have like DeepMind working on the AlphaGo that happened quite a couple of years ago, which did revolutionize the industry in general. And now we have something, the generative AI coming out with the LLMs and, transformers mixed with RL and stuff like that, working hand in hand. Now with the way the industry is going, I just wanted to get your thoughts on where deep RL, where it lies at the moment, considering the focus more on like generative AI and the focus more on getting things from human feedback, like getting the model to work based more on human feedback rather than the whole automated process that RL not natively works based on. Furthermore, the question was now more on in an instance, in like a financial instance, right? Automated trading, which is very very common. How exactly can we implement like RLHF and also see the applications of deep RL side by side? Can they work? Can deep RL be more useful in that instance, or should we focus more on where the industry is going on with like your generative AIs and your RLHF? I know it's a bit of all over the place. Yeah.
Okay, so just a quick one because I have to always mention this. So at least where I'm seeing, especially on the reinforcement learning side of things, the biggest gap that exists is accessibility to providing feedback, right? So there's, globally speaking, only a select few number of people can actually provide that feedback. So where it's going towards is the distributed reinforcement learning aspect. So being able to have the ability to communicate to this overall feedback while being on distributed networks, and hence the federated learning aspect of things. So it's going down that route where combining federated learning with reinforcement learning to get a global model out in the market as opposed to just having a very niche little subset of it. That's what I'm seeing so far.
Just on your case of the use cases for, what should you be using for different use cases, right? I think try not to overcomplicate things, right? I think when you're developing a solution, use the most accessible and the easiest one. You don't have to hop on the hype and say, right, we need to do reinforcement learning or we have to do this generative AI. Sometimes a simple automation might be the best way and it saves you a lot of money as well in the process. So I think just to keep in mind, when you are developing a solution, don't always go straight to the hype. Think about what's the most feasible as well.
Just to add, the HF in RLHF means it's useful when you want your thing to be more human-like. But like for trader bots, humans are really bad traders. Like you shouldn't be trying to model a human there, right? You can optimize further by not, doing what humans do. So I think that's exactly what Kerry said. Just because something is in the news right now doesn't mean it's right for all use cases. And we see it so many times. Like there's so many posts on LinkedIn, like everyone's using ChatGPT, but no one knows how to use it correctly, right? But I can tell you. So it's not every problem is an LLM problem, right? There's a plethora of other things that you could do. AI itself it's not just NLP or the auto-regressive models that have progressed to this point. Computer vision is doing amazingly. There's amazing things that can be done with different kinds of models. It's not just Gen AI that's moving at the speed. It's definitely more flashy because I can talk to it and it seems like it's a human. But there's quite, it's the hype cycle, right? Yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah, so maybe in the field, exactly right. So in algo trading, you're not going to use an LLM model. It doesn't make any sense. But what you might want to do is one of the best use cases for it is around financial, almost like in a financial advisor. What does a financial advisor do? They look at the news, they look at the trends, or they see where what is happening in the news, how that affects certain markets, whether you're in equities or commodities. It tries to figure out then from there which are the best stocks to buy, which are the best stocks to dump, whatever it may be, and kind of gives obviously the people that sort of financial advice based on that information in the background. That is something an LLM would be brilliant at. That's exactly the role it should play. And if you're talking about RLHF obviously only applies. Reinforcement learning is if you're building a neural net. You don't always build a neural net for algo trading, right? But in this particular use case, you might want to do that. And again, that financial advice is like, I don't know, am I more commodities focused versus equities focused? If I am commodities focused, what commodities? Do I want to only do trades for commodities that are present here in the SADC region? Okay, that's how I'm going to train it to give the recommendations based on that area that I want it to be focused in. That's the way you got to think about this in general. But to the points that everyone has made, definitely don't always think that this is the answer to everything. You always have to go through the research and figure out which is the best model of it, obviously, for your use case. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I'll hand it over to you, Mpumi.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, guys. That was very insightful. And I hope that everybody in the audience found that to be insightful as well. So we're going to move on to, okay, I think we have a question, right? Online? Oh, it's a clap. There we go. Cool. Thank you so much. Okay, so moving on to the next segment. LP, you want to join us in front? We're going to run our Kahoot, right? And this is the opportunity you're going to get to win prizes. So maybe I'll just run through the rules and how to get onto the platform, and then I'll hand over to LP. So there's a QR code on your screen. Or you can just type in www.kahoot.it and then use the game pin that's on your screen right now. So put out your phone. If you're on your PC, works as well. Just go on there and then let's get everybody on the platform. So make sure you put your name on so we know who you are so that we can announce your name. And people on the call as well, you're welcome to do this. If you happen to win the prize, we'll get your address and ship it to you or find a way to get it to you. But let's just enroll in the game. We're going to ask you 5 questions based on all the content that was absorbed today. And then, yeah, you stand a chance to win some Google Synthesis swag. Okay, so we'll just give it a few minutes for everybody to join. That screen should be like super full. Okay, the person that's just joined the call now, we are in a quiz segment. So please just log on to the Kahoot, www.kahoot.it, and then type in that game pin over there. Log on to the game. Great. And yeah, stand a chance to win some cool swag. There should be some music. There.
Cool. So we're going to start the quiz. What is the art of figuring out what text to feed your LLM to get it to take on the behavior you want? Gen AI, prompt design, fine tuning, or prompt tuning? Yeah.
Like you only have 10 seconds.
Because there's swag at stake.
Because there's
right?
swag at stake.
Awesome.
Scoreboard.
Bart Simpson is in the lead. That is a great name.
Is Bart in the room or online? That's not the question.
Cool. Next question. When was Lambda published? 2020, 2023, 2000, or 2001? No, coming in quicker now. Fabrice. Did I say that right? Nice.
Nice.
Which processing unit did Google design? NVIDIA, GPU, CPU, or TPU? This is a tough one. Nice. Fabrice, on fire.
You must have clicked that one very quickly.
When is Google's Gen AI? What is Google's Gen AI offering? Sorry, I can't read. Bard, Apple, the Vertex AI or Model 1. People were looking for dates because I can't read. Nice. Oh, we got a new leader. Where's Sven? Nice. And last question. What is the world's first language model? PaLM, Bard, BERT, or Lambda? Who's gonna take it? Are you guys ready?
DK, are you in the room?
Hey.
Well done. Come up so we can give you your prize. Number 2, Lionel, if you're in the room. And Sven. Well done. Awesome. Thank you so much, LP. That was cool. Alrighty, that actually gets us to the end of our session, right? I really hope that you found the session insightful. I will hand over back to the Google Developer Group ambassadors, just to give us a closing and maybe just sum up what we discussed today, and maybe if there's any announcements that you're going to make in your next events. But personally, I just want to thank everybody for coming over. Thank you to the panelists for bringing, some creative and clever juices to the table. Thank you to the ones that have left as well, Mzamo and Fabian. I thought the discussions we had were also pretty insightful. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you so much. As soon as Koketso is done with our closing, we can then go ahead and start to rub shoulders. And I believe there's some beverages and eats outside as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming through here for this amazing event. A very, very big thank you to Google as well as Synthesis, our panelists. Thank you so much. It was very insightful. Thank you to the team as well. But most importantly, thank you to everyone that actually came today. So you guys can give yourselves a round of applause. All right, so in closing, I just want to tell you guys more about what GDG actually is all about. So what GDG is, it's just basically a community-based program where we try to engage or bring this kind of content to the public, right? So we try to engage experts or people that's in the industry and to share their knowledge and experiences by hosting such events. So here at GDG, what we try to do is we try to host at least an event every last Thursday of the month, if all goes well. But for more information, you guys can follow us on our social media platforms. I don't know if Ishmael, you can show that. So we are available on all social platforms. So your Twitters, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn as well. We are very much keen to actually hear what you guys think about what we do in terms of suggestions or, creative ideas around that. So just to give a brief in terms of our next event, which is called Google I/O. We are also going to be in collaboration with one of the other chapters called GDG Soweto. And you can find more information, obviously, just following us on our social medias. Actually, the GDG Soweto leads are actually joining us here. So Simon and LSG, you guys are there as well. So it is, we're trying to make it quite a big event. But as I said, I don't want to dive too much into details. But yet again, thank you so much for our panelists for coming through. Bumi, so much. Thank you so much for this event. And just in closing, there's going to be refreshments outside. And once again, thank you so much and do enjoy. Thank you.